Okay. Uh, it's a little bit different software because I'm using that to record. So, God, I hope it works. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do it over myself when I get back to my office. I'm Dr. Ridenauer. I've been here this is my 21st year at OBU. So, 21st minus 3 Army deployments in the year. So, actually, I've only taught here 18 years, but I've been here till 21. So I spent a year doing family ministry at Fort Hood, a year in Iraq, and a year in Afghanistan. So that also means when it comes to stories that are examples, most of my stories are going to be Army stories. I don't know much about others, so just bear with me. My office. Let me see if I go on to others. No, I can't do this. I'm gonna have to go back to that. Okay. Let's start here. Yeah. So my office is in Montgomery Hall. Everybody know where that's at? So it's Bailey Business Center, a lot of classrooms in there. Next door is Montgomery Hall. The offices are up on the second floor. Just find the stairwell, go up there. There's not much up there. So it's pretty easy to find. 210 Montgomery Hall. Also, if you don't feel like walking over there, now that everybody knows how to use Zoom for absolutely everything, you just that's my cell phone number. Send me a text message or something, and we'll just do that real quick and save some time if you want. No big deal. My office hours are, that slide's wrong. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 2 to 4. So every day except Friday, 2 to 4. I'm around at some other times if you need that. That's fine. In and out of class, I'm up there, but that's the best time. So, okay, what else? Here are the goals for the course. Now, ideally the goal would be to have you walk out of here loving philosophy. That may be kind of a high bar for some of you. So at the minimum, I'm hoping that at least you learn to appreciate it. I want you to understand the thought of various important thinkers in history. Also I want you to be able to identify the arguments and in their thought, to engage them, right? Engage those. This is not really just although you're going to have to learn a lot of information, is the case, and a lot about what people said. This is not really about just learning information. What I want you to be able to do by the time you leave this course is really to develop a skill in examining certain deep, hard ideas, okay? And that's an important thing to do in life, because if you can't do that, you really can't make much of a difference in the world. So, the world's looking for people who can think about hard things and come up with good solutions to hard problems. And we're going to think about some hard things this semester. Now, we're going to focus on particular philosophical problems. But you're going to be able to take those skills that you develop here and apply them to absolutely anything. So, so we're going to engage the thought of those thinkers on various problems, like is there a non-physical soul? Do we have free will? Stuff like that. Okay, and then assess those arguments, those positions, and come up with your own positions on those topics. Next, here are the basic questions that we're going to examine this semester. First of all, we're going to talk about knowledge. What are the things that we can know? What are the limits to our knowledge? Where does knowledge come from? Okay. Then we're going to move on to the structure of reality. What's the nature of reality? What's real? God's going to count for a big topic of that, right? What reasons are there for believing that God exists? What reasons are there for not believing that God exists, and what are the responses to that? What are we? Are we, obviously we're physical beings. Are we more than that? Are we free? So what's the nature of the mind? We're also going to talk about things like, can computers have minds? Some philosophical questions are, do other people have minds? So we may talk about that a little bit. Next, we move into sort of morality and ethics. What are the things we should do? What makes an action right? What makes an action wrong? How should we structure our social systems? What gives the state its power and authority? Okay. What's the what's a just distribution of resources? How should resources be distributed? Should they be distributed equally? Should they be distributed unequally? If they should be distributed unequally, then what are the rules that govern that distribution? So, and then we're going to close the semester on, does life have any meaning, or is it just absurd? You do whatever you want to. All right, questions so far? That's going to be the semester. Here are the assignments you're going to need to do. Okay, we'll have 2 exams, one in the middle and one at the end. So those exams will be a mixture of a multiple choice, some short paragraph, and then one long essay question. I'll also post on Canvas various quizzes. Okay, those quizzes won't be for credit. There'll be things like multiple choice questions that'll be related to the exam questions, just to check on see if how you're doing with the material. Right, that's for your own benefit. So you can do those, and if it comes back just absolutely blow that quiz, then you think I may have a problem with this section here, so maybe I better come see it. Okay, so that's for you. But there will also be some graded projects. Those will basically be, in some cases, it will be pick out an argument from this reading, right? Analyze that argument. Tell me what your position is on it. Do you have objections? Do you agree? Or it could be, what about this reading is relevant to a particular problem in contemporary culture, right? Or how does this help you understand your position in contemporary culture? Things like that. Those will be basically short essays, probably no more than a page is what I'll be looking for. Those will be great. The dialogue, I used to, I've changed it this semester. I used to put in the syllabus, you get a score for your participation in class, and that was worth an exam score. So, but the problem is, I've already told you, I've got big problems with names. So I couldn't remember the names of who participated great, not, so I had to give everybody a perfect score on that. I've cut that out, sorry for you. But what I will do is if you, because philosophy is done best in kind of the dialogue with each other. So what I want you to do is ask questions about the material. If I say something you don't think that's right, raise your hand and tell me I'm wrong, and we'll talk about why. So you may convince me, is the case. So it's that's how we get to the truth, is by engaging with each other, right? So that's good. I'm never, unlike a lot of people in contemporary America, I am never happier than when somebody tells me I'm wrong, and they've got reasons. So I really like that, because if I've got a false belief, I want to give it up, right, for a true belief. So we will do that with each other respectfully, is the case, but don't be afraid to object to something or ask questions about it, wonder why this is true. So if you participated, given a lot of extra value to the class, if your grade's on the borderline, I'll use that to determine if I'm going to bump it up or not. So, okay. This is your big assignment, this philosophical apology. That's a paper that you're going to write. You're going to turn it in at the end of the semester. Ideally, you're not going to write it at the end of the semester. So this is something modeled after, if you've ever read or heard anything about Augustine's Confessions, he wrote kind of an autobiography, but it was an intellectual autobiography. This is what I believe. This is what sort of led me to those beliefs, and that's what I want you to do. I want you to write a paper that's your position on the major topics that we've covered over the semester. So and you'll turn that in at the end. It will include everything except that meaning of life section, because that's going to be right at the very end of the semester. That should be very easy for you to do if you do it like this, okay? As soon as we finish one of those topics, write the section, okay? If you save it for the day before it's due, it's not going to be pretty. But if you do it well, it should be, 10 to 12 pages. Now, first semester I assigned this is a really valuable project because this is you coming to grips with what you believe, right, and why you believe it. But it was kind of confusing for people the first semester I assigned it. So later, after that semester, I wrote one of my own. It's posted there on Canvas. You can go up to the top, and it will say example apology or something like that, or sample. Click on that, and that's my stuff. Write it like that, okay? No citations. You don't need to cite anything. You can refer to the readings in the book, but as far as I'm concerned, you can just say Descartes says this, okay? I don't even need to know the page number. Don't do that for any other paper that you write at OBU. Just this. I might have some citations on that, but as I struggled with that, I decided it's really hard to figure out a way to do this just referring to a textbook. So don't worry about that. But cover the same topics I did. Don't write the same things that I wrote. Okay, but I want to know what you think. Don't just tell me what I think. All right, questions about that? We can talk about that more as it comes up. And in fact, as you write them, I'll be glad to look it over. When you say we finish the epistemology section, you write a section on epistemology and send it to me. I'll say, yeah, that looks good, right? Or no, you're missing stuff here. You need to revise this, or maybe you need a little more argument here. So be glad to look those over as you do it. Extra credit. The philosophy department has philosophy forums every semester. They are always Fridays at 4 o'clock throughout the semester. We didn't know if the administration was going to let us have them this semester early on, so I didn't put the dates in the syllabus. We didn't decide them. We'll post them as they come along, and they'll also be advertised around campus. You'll see them on posters. So go to those. I'll give you some questions to write to answer basically what positions did the person who was giving the lecture take, and do you agree, disagree? It's really pretty simple. So that will be extra credit. Now there's some people who have conflicts on Friday afternoons, right? So that's maybe you've got a job, you've got to go to work during that time, or you're an athlete and you have to go to practice. Coaches seem unreasonable. Okay, yes, that's not a problem if you just give me a note from your boss or your coach, and I'll sign you an article to essentially do the same thing, so everybody will get the opportunity to do it. So extra credit, you may or may not need it, but unfortunately, that's one of those things that you didn't know you needed until it was too late to get. So preemptive, take it's a smart thing to do. Okay, let's talk about doing well. Success. First of all, success is not getting a particular grade. So don't measure your self-worth by what grade you get in any course, whether that's intro to philosophy or not. You need to do your best, and some people will succeed. It may turn out that getting a B in this course is success for you. Okay, it may turn out that you can get an A in this course and really not succeed because you didn't do what you should have with what God's given you. This is what success is being faithful to with the gifts that God's given you at the place that God's called you to be at a particular time. So that's how you measure your success, not in terms of the grade. Other than that, I will help you earn the grade that you want. So if you're struggling through something, you say, I really want to understand this. I'll be happy to talk you through it as long as you need. Is the case. I'll do everything that I can to make sure not that I give you the grade that you want, but you earn the grade that you want. Okay, what else? Here's some secrets. Come to class. Number one. The textbook is primary readings by philosophers who are mostly long dead now. Stuff that's been translated from Greek and Latin. People who did not write like we like to read now. This is not the kind of course where you just can read the assignment and expect to pass. So come to class. But you do need to read, so be prepared. You're going to read a lot of stuff, and it's not going to make a clue. You're not going to have a clue. That doesn't make any sense. You're not going to have a clue what it means as you read it. But it'll clear up, I hope, as we talk about it. But you still need to read it and struggle with it before the class. Some of it's pretty easy. Some of it's pretty straightforward. Now, what I have done over the years is cut the length of the reading assignments. So it is really hard reading, but most of the time I'm not asking you to read very much, just a few pages. So go ahead, read that stuff. Again, this is about it's kind of the skill of wrestling with difficult material, difficult ideas. And again, if you want to go out into the world and make a difference, you need to be able to do that. So, and our culture is like slipping down on this. So, one of the best pieces of evidence for that is the little phrase TLDR, right, that you see on top of all these internet readings for people who, that's too long for me to read, is the case. Well, actually, it's only a 5 minute. You got 5 minutes is the case. So just tell me what's important. No, it's for you to figure out what's important. And so that's a skill we need to recover. Don't get distracted. So easiest way to get distracted is with your cell phone. I don't see any computers in class. I don't mind it if you take notes on a computer if you need to. Turns out there are a lot of studies that say that actually handwriting it out is the best way to learn material. So do that. But if you do have your computer, just focus on what's going on in class. And this is another thing that is sort of slipping out in American culture. We don't really pay close attention to what's going on around us. So how many times have you had a conversation with somebody and as they're speaking, what you're really thinking about is how you're going to respond, right? Instead of just focusing on what they're saying. So we can engage with each other and have some sense of understanding. All right, so that's that. One of the most important things, if you don't understand it, don't think, oh, I'll just look at it later and it'll clear up, right? Ask the question. There are, for one thing, if you don't understand something, odds are 2/3 of the class doesn't understand it either. And the likely explanation for why you don't understand it is because I didn't explain it very well. So when you raise your hand and ask the question, you give me another chance to get it right, and I appreciate that. So ask questions, and again, that will reinforce the material. It's good. We have, and also answer questions. When I ask a question in class, answer. We have one problem with the American education system is we have beaten into students a fear to be wrong when they answer a question. But to be honest, a wrong answer is one of the most valuable things that you can get, is the case. Because, again, probably, if I didn't ask the question, nobody answered, everyone would probably have that wrong answer in their minds, right? But when we get that wrong answer, that leads us on a path to the right answer, to the truth. And that's a good thing. That's what we're at. Come to my lonely office hours. So is the if something doesn't make sense, or just come in if you've got something you want to chat about, or some problem that you've been thinking about, something you heard that was interesting. You want to hear what I think about it. Come on by and talk. I would much rather talk about philosophy with anybody than grade. So please come to my office. Give me an excuse, not the grade. Finally, a lot of this, assignments are going to be done out of class. Make sure you do your own work. Nothing more to say about that. Okay, now, all that stuff wasn't particularly important. Now you need to start taking notes. So, philosophy, what is it? Well, it comes from, the word comes from two Greek words. So, philos means love. several Greek words for love. Have you ever heard a sermon that says there, that all these Greek words? Almost all those sermons are just really bad because they'll say this word means this kind of love, this word means this kind of love. It turns out that in ancient Greek literature, they're used pretty much interchangeably. So in general, this is the kind of love that for a friend or for a brother. But all of those different types of love are also attributed to God. So including eros, philos, agape, all of them attributed to God in Scripture. So that's just a preacher who hasn't done much work, I guess, or doesn't know much Greek, I guess is the case. But the other word, this word doesn't have several meanings, sophos, philos and sophos. Sophos is wisdom. So philosophy, the love of wisdom. That doesn't tell us very much. Now, so here's something that I think that this is the way that people use the term. So when I fly, sometimes you get on an airplane and you feel talkative, you want to talk to the people around you. Other times you just want to be left alone. So if I get on the plane and people ask me what I do and I'm feeling in the mood to talk to other people, I say I'm a philosopher. If I don't want to talk, I say I'm a Baptist minister, and that just shuts them up. But everybody, this is why they talk if I say I'm a philosopher, because everybody thinks that they have a philosophy. They'll say, my philosophy is. So when a person uses that phrase, this tends to be, I think, what they mean. It's a set of beliefs that are very difficult to prove true. Okay? And the reason they're very difficult to prove true is because they're at the foundation of everything else that they believe. They're important to explaining the way that we understand ourselves, the world around us, and the things that really matter in life. Okay, basically these are the background, basic, foundational assumptions that we're making. Everybody has them. Hardly everybody examines them. Okay, philosophy is in the business of examining those assumptions. So here is our goal for the class, is to identify those basic beliefs, to examine them, and to assess them. What reason do we have for believing them? Yeah. So, for example, most Christians don't really step back and think, what reasons do I have for believing in God? Especially Christians who have been raised in the church, they've just always believed in God. Okay? So it's when you come to philosophy class that forces you to step back and examine. Are there reasons for believing in the existence of God? Yes. Are there reasons against believing in the existence of God? Well, the answer to that is yes, too. So we're going to have to assess them both and balance out and see where the evidence wins. Now, no big secret, this is Oklahoma Baptist University. I'm a Baptist minister. I'll tell you who's going to win on that case, right? But we are going to examine it fairly. Okay, 3 branches of philosophy. Okay, epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics. All come from originally Greek words. We'll see. So, everybody got that? If it turns out that I've flipped through a slide too fast, just tell me and I'll go back. All right. Moving on, epistemology. Epistemology comes from a Greek word episteme. You don't need to know that, but that's one of the several Greek words for knowledge. I think the Greeks have more words for knowledge than they do for love. Epistemology is a study of knowledge and also other concepts that are related to knowledge. One of the most important of those related concepts is rational belief. Okay? So here's some examples of questions in epistemology. And this will be one thing on the first exam. Well, I'll say, what area of philosophy is this question relevant to, right? So, of course, what's the definition of knowledge? What does it mean to know something? That's an obvious question in epistemology. When it says, when is a belief rational, that's a question about how much evidence do we have to have in order for it to be reasonable to believe that belief. Or are there cases when it's reasonable for you to believe something, rational for you to believe something, when you don't have any evidence whatsoever? Okay, this will be one of the things that we ask when we talk about the existence of God, because there are people who say, oh, there's no good evidence for believing in the existence of God, therefore you shouldn't believe it. There are some other people who in history have said, yes, you're right, there's no conclusive evidence for belief in the existence of God, but it's reasonable for you to believe it anyway. So we'll see some stuff like that. Next is metaphysics. Okay. Again, comes from two Greek words, meta, which means after, and physics, which means, what do you think? Well, physics. So it's here's my favorite story about where this name came from. I'm pretty confident that it's wrong, but it's still a good story. So Aristotle wrote a book that's called the Metaphysics, but Aristotle didn't title those books. They just come out, and he didn't give them the titles. The titles came later. Well, the story goes that the people who categorized Aristotle's works, Aristotle wrote works on meteorology, biology, he wrote works on ethics, poetics, politics, so on. And then he had the physics, so they put them in order. They categorized them, decided to put them in order. After they got to the physics, they had one book left over that was really weird stuff. They didn't know what to do with it. They just called it After the Physics. Put it that. It turns out metaphysics is a study of the fundamental nature of reality. So, the existence of things, that's a question in metaphysics. Does God exist, right? Is there a soul? Are we free? Philosophers talk about time travel. Is time travel possible? That's a metaphysical question, right? So a lot of interesting things to talk about there, which we will over the semester. And finally, ethics. Greek word there is ethika, means the same thing as ethics today. Study of morality, right and wrong. Okay, what makes one action right and another action wrong? Is it the consequences? Can it be right for you to do something that has terrible consequences? So maybe it's not consequences. Maybe it's a list of moral duties. What's the relationship of the existence of God to moral truth, right? Does God decide what the moral truths are going to be? Or is there a moral law that's independent of what God decides? So we may cover that in the course of this semester. We'll definitely spend the day on moral relativism. Does moral truth vary from culture to culture, or is it the same for everyone? We'll move into not just a day, but several weeks on political philosophy. So, what gives the government the authority that it has? So, standard answer in, let's say, the Western world is what? What gives the government's authority? Yeah, so people, right. Now, it's called social contract theory in political philosophy. So you go back to Hobbes and go back to Locke. There's a social contract we engage in to form the state. I didn't sign any contract, right? So why does the government have any authority over me? Purely because I was born here, is the case. So we'll talk about that, and we'll even talk about contemporary social contract theory. So how should resources be distributed? Contemporary social contract theory is really concerned about that. We'll compare sort of modern welfare state to libertarianism, various ways, and see what are the problems with each. Okay, and now, last thing for today. We'll probably finish early today, but what we're going to do now is talk about some basic logic. So at least some tools of basic logic, or at least some concepts of basic logic. If you want to know any more than that, I also teach a critical thinking class, or I teach a upper level symbolic logic class if you're interested in that stuff. But you need to know some basic concepts in order to understand at least how we address these issues in class. Okay, argument. The basic tool in philosophy is called an argument. Okay. There's a great sketch by Monty Python called The Argument Clinic. Maybe if I remember, I'll post a link to it in Canvas. But an argument is not what you have with your little brother or your little sister. An argument is the way that we use to prove that something is true. Okay, so an argument is a set of sentences. Now, I shouldn't have put sentences there because it's a set of particular kind of sentences. Declarative statements, declarative sentence. There are statements, there are questions, there are commands, right? So what does a statement have that questions and commands don't? What do you think?
Reasons.
What's that?
Like reasons and evidence.
Okay, yeah, but the statement itself doesn't have, ideally you're going to have reasons, evidence for believing that statement or something, but that's not a feature, an intrinsic feature of the statement. So, yeah, those reasons are going to be other statements, right? So, well, what makes a statement differ from a command or yeah? Doesn't require any action? Yeah, that's true. Maybe. The question. I mean, not in the same sense. I'll go ahead and grant that. Right. So when I ask a question, very very often when I ask a question in class, I get no reaction from anybody. But ideally, what I want, right, is a response from another person. Or a command, right? Again, you want the person to do something, so there's either answer or response. I think that's good. But actually, for statements, there is a response that is at least implied when I utter a statement, and you've got three options. You can either accept it, reject it, or be an agnostic about it, right? But that's all in terms of belief is the case, not an overt response. I agree that. So that's a good answer. That's not what I'm looking for, but I really like the answer. Yeah. Anything else? Actually, what I'm looking for is a lot simpler than that. What?
It makes a claim about something?
Good. Okay. That's not what I'm looking for either, but that's directly relevant to what I'm looking for. Because it makes a claim about something, it can be what? One of two things. True or false. Statements have truth value. Okay? And the reason that they have truth value is because they claim that the world is a particular way. When they get it right, we call them true. When they get it wrong, we call them false. Okay? Now, it doesn't make any sense to call a question true or false, right? So what's your name?
Lauren.
So if I ask Lauren what she had for breakfast and she responds, you're lying, we're having a communication problem, right? What I said can't be either true or false. Just doesn't make any sense. Same thing with a command. But statements have, now there are some weird statements, maybe we'll talk about them later, that get us into trouble, but for our purposes now, we'll assume that every statement has one of two truth values and only one of those truth values, right? Either true or false. Now, one of the statements in this set is the conclusion. The conclusion is a sentence you're trying to prove. That's the claim you're trying to prove, okay, with reasons here. The premises are going to be the reasons. So the premises are the reasons that a person uses to try to prove that the conclusion is true. All right, here's an example. So everything that began to exist has a cause, the world began to exist, therefore the world has a cause. Famous argument called the Kalam argument, argument for the existence of God. It's called the Kalam because it comes up first in a tradition in Islamic philosophy called the Kalam. Really popular in contemporary Christian philosophy now. So that's an argument. What's the conclusion? World has a cause, right? What tells us that's the conclusion?
Therefore.
Okay, we got a word there. That's going to be important. So that's the conclusion. Everything else is a premise. Now look at this. This is the same argument, right? It's just phrased slightly differently. The world has a cause because everything that began to exist has a cause. World began to exist. What's the conclusion here? It's still the world has a cause, right? But that word because tells us that the other stuff are premises. So when you analyze an argument, you can't correctly analyze an argument until you figure out what's the conclusion and what are the premises. But here's the important thing. Don't take location in the passage to be the clue. Okay, the conclusion can come anywhere. Okay, look for those other words. And those other words are called indicator words. We've got two major conclusion indicators and two major premise indicators. What do you think the important two conclusion indicators are? One's easy because we've already seen it, right? That's what? Therefore. What's the other one?
Because. Is it not because?
No.
Oh.
But hold on for a little while. That answer will be right a little later. Okay. So therefore, anybody else? What? No, finally just means last, right? So, in fact, you could have a list of premises and say, finally, here's my last premise. Okay. So don't rely on that. Therefore and so. Okay. Those are the two most popular these days. Now, there are a bunch of others that mean conclusions, like hence and thus. I tell you, I come from a really small town in eastern Oklahoma. Where I come from, people do not say hence and thus. So we're sticking with therefore and so. There are also premise indicators. What are the two most popular premise indicators? Because. Yeah, you were way ahead of your time. So, what's the other one? Anybody think? Sense, is that what you said? Yes, absolutely. Because and sense, S-I-N-C-E. So those are the two most. Look for those. Those will help you determine what the argument is. Now, once we figure out what the premises and the conclusion are, what we'll generally do is put it in what's called standard form. Okay. All that means is that we list each premise separately on a separate line, number them, draw a line underneath, and then put the conclusion. Now, that little 3 dots, you see that's a mathematical symbol for therefore. You don't need to put that. I've coded that into some script that I use to do arguments. If you can't sort of impress people with things they don't understand, then what use is there to laugh at? So, but that line is enough to tell us that there's the conclusion, so you don't need that. Now, the reason that we do that is because some of these arguments are really complex and complicated. And for instance, I don't want to keep having to say the premise that says that everything that began to exist has a cause. So we can just now talk about premise number 1. Okay, that's just makes it easier for us to discuss the argument. Next, 2 kinds of logic. There's deductive logic and inductive logic, 2 kinds of reasoning. I usually cover this in like high school science, and I've read a lot of high school science textbooks, and the way they define it is actually wrong. So, not to an extent right, but not exactly precisely. It's really easy. A deductive argument is one that's intended to be valid. Now, that doesn't make any sense now because I haven't given you the definition of valid. Inductive arguments are about probability. The goal of an inductive argument is just to establish that something is probably true. Okay, there are inductive arguments for the existence of God. There are arguments that conclude, given this evidence that we have, it's very, very likely that God exists. That's an inductive argument. Okay, you can have very, very strong inductive arguments, but an inductive argument at best only establishes that something is likely to be true, even highly likely to be true, but it's always possible for it to be false. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, valid. This is probably our most important concept today. An argument is valid when it's such that if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. If the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. Okay, that's a conditional statement. If then, it's called a conditional statement. It's like saying, if you average at least a 90 in the class, you will get an A. Okay, that statement is absolutely true. But notice that statement doesn't guarantee that you're going to get an A, right? It doesn't say you're going to get an A. It doesn't say that you're going to average at least 90. It just says if one is true, then the other will be also. Just about the logical relationship between the two. Now another way to state this is it's impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false. Okay, means the same thing. Okay, what validity is about the logical relationship between the premises and the conclusion. They have such a relationship that if the premises are true, it can't be the case that the conclusion is false. Okay.
Could there be like a bad interpretation of true premises? So if you stated two true facts as the premises, couldn't you just make a bad conclusion from those two?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess I need an example, right, to know exactly what you're getting at.
So it's so if you if I said that I'm trying to remember the term for it, but it's like the logic statements that they're true statements, but they don't equal the conclusion because it's just a bad leap from the...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Okay, if it's a bad leap from the premises to the conclusion.
Right,
yeah, that means that the argument's not going to be valid. It's going to be invalid, right? So there things like, so let me give you, where the premises are actually irrelevant to the truth of the conclusion. Yeah, you can have an argument with true premises, true conclusion, but it's invalid argument, right? Because they don't have that logical connection. That's exactly right. So you could have something like, well, let me think about this. All dogs are mammals. Lassie's a dog. What follows from that? Lassie's a mammal. That's a valid argument, right? Everybody see, all dogs are mammals, Lassie's a dog, therefore Lassie is a mammal. So now if I say all dogs are mammals, Lassie is a dog, therefore the chair is gray, they're both true premises, true conclusion, but it's an invalid argument, right? Yeah, that's absolutely possible. Good. Yeah. So, and that's really the next thing. If it's not valid, we just call that invalid. Now, every deductive argument is either valid or invalid. Actually, every argument is either valid or invalid. And there's no middle ground. Yeah. Now, just because it's an invalid argument, though, doesn't make it a bad argument. Okay. Keep that in mind. That's important to remember. Because every inductive argument is by definition invalid. Okay, remember I said an invalid argument or an inductive argument only gets you what? Probability. Okay. Now, a deductive argument, the goal is that these premises absolutely guarantee the truth of this conclusion. So an inductive argument, that's not going to be valid. It doesn't guarantee the truth of this. It only makes it highly likely. So just because it's invalid doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. It is the case. But that all dogs are mammals, Lassie's a dog, chair is gray, that's bad. Okay, that's not even a good inductive argument. Sound argument. Here's the gold standard. Okay, we can have a valid argument that's bad. So, but a sound argument is a valid argument that has true premises. Okay, you can think of a valid argument like this. If it's valid, that means if those premises are true, then they're a good reason for believing this conclusion. Okay. Now, but that in itself doesn't say that they're good reasons, right? They need to be true. If it's sound, it's valid and it has true premises. So what do we know about the conclusion of a sound argument? It's true. Good. Yeah, absolutely. It has to be true. Why? Because it's valid, and valid means if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true, and we know it has true premises. So put those two things together, we get true conclusions. And that's what we want. We want arguments with true conclusions. Okay, any questions so far? So 2 steps to evaluating an argument. Number 1, you ask, is it valid? Is it valid? Now we're talking about deductive arguments here, not inductive arguments. If it turns out our answer to question number 1 is no, we don't care if the premises are true. All right? Because if it's an invalid argument, that means those premises aren't good reasons for believing the conclusion, even if they're true. So if it's not valid, we don't care about the premises. Now, if the answer is yes, it is valid, then we have to go ahead and ask another question. Are the premises true? Now, if it's valid, and if you agree that the argument's valid, and you agree that the premises are true, you have to say what? You have to say that the conclusion is also true. What you can't do is say, yep, I absolutely agree that's a valid argument. I absolutely agree that your premises are true, but I think your conclusion is false. If that's the case, we're going to commit you to a mental hospital. No, is that right? So if you agree that it's valid and the premises are true, you have to assent to the conclusion. Okay. But if you don't think that the conclusion is true, if you think the conclusion is false, then it's up to you to do one of two things: either show that that argument's invalid, or show that there's a false premise. Okay. So when we say false premises, we mean at least one false premise. All you got to show is that one of those premises is false. Okay, everybody with me? Make sense? Okay, now, last couple of things we're going to talk about, some mistakes in reasoning. So, a mistake in reasoning is called a fallacy. There are a whole bunch of fallacies. If you're interested in that, I can give you a handout that, I don't know, 20, 25 different fallacies, all with impressive Latin names. Okay, so, but I want you to know 3 in particular. Number 1 is called the ad hominem fallacy. So in Latin, that means against the person. So an ad hominem fallacy, you commit the ad hominem fallacy when you attack the person rather than the argument. Okay. So we bring in, Dr. Thomas, president. He used to be our dean in the School of Theology and Ministry. We bring in people from other colleges to deliver papers to the faculty. And Dr. Thomas, every time when he introduced me, he would say, "We attack the jugular of the argument, not the person." Okay, and this happens all the time. I mean, we're getting into campaign season. Just pay attention, right? Candidates will call each other names rather than respond to positions about or arguments about positions. So when you commit an ad hominem fallacy, when you say don't listen to anything he says, he's just a jerk, right? Well, he may very well be a jerk. That's that might be true, but he's still giving you an argument with reasons for a conclusion. So whether or not he's a jerk is irrelevant. So you got to respond to the argument. Okay. Next one is called begging the question. An argument begs the question when it's impossible to believe the premises unless you already believe the conclusion. I mean, the goal of my argument is to convince another person that my conclusion is true. And if I give them an argument where they can't accept the premises unless they already believe the conclusion, it's going to be useless in convincing them. Does this make sense? Here's my favorite example about the existence of God. So premise 1, the Bible says that God exists. Okay. Premise 2, the Bible is true because it's the inspired word of God. Conclusion, God exists. You can see that wouldn't convince anybody who didn't already believe that God exists, right? So they'll grant that premise that says that the Bible says that God exists, but they wouldn't grant that premise that says the Bible is the inspired word of God. That just assumes that the conclusion is true. Okay. So it makes sense? All right, so our last one, this is probably the most important because I think this is the most commonly committed fallacy in undergraduate research papers. It's called the straw man argument. You commit the straw man argument when you are responding to another person's argument, but you intentionally reconstruct that argument to make it easy to attack. So that's why it's called a straw man. A straw man is easy to push over. Okay. So when you're responding to somebody else, especially if it's something that somebody wrote a long time ago, you think this is a bad argument. So if what you do is to either oversimplify it or make it more extreme than it really is, right? Again, this happens in political discourse, where somebody will put up a campaign commercial and it will say, "My opponent said," right, blah, 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 blah. And then you realize, wow, did it really say that? That just sounds kooky, right? Then you go back and you look at the part that they're referencing, and they never did quite say that. They either made that more extreme, or in a lot of cases, they just took it completely out of context. Okay, so that's all a straw man fallacy. So if you're interested in fallacies, you'll be hearing a bunch of them from all sides, right, of political discourse in America for the next 2 months. So if you get any interesting examples, I'd like to hear them. Okay, here's the last slide, I believe. Cognitive biases. A cognitive bias is not the same thing as fallacy. A fallacy is a mistaken reasoning. A cognitive bias is a tendency to reason badly. Okay? There's some psychological facts about us that kind of impede our reasoning abilities. They don't always impede our reasoning abilities, they're just tendencies, and the more that you know about these, the more likely you won't sort of get sucked into it. Okay? So there are two that I want you to know about. Number one is called the confirmation bias. So now that you know that term, you'll see it pop up in a lot of different material. Confirmation bias says that we have a great tendency to only see evidence that supports what we believe. We have a tendency to ignore all evidence that disconfirms our beliefs. Okay. Stereotypes get grounded like this. For any statement that anybody makes about a group, you can probably find some members of the group that meet that statement. Okay? Something like women are bad drivers. Are there some women who are bad drivers? If somebody believes that, every time they're driving down the highway and they'll say, oh, look at her, she's putting on her makeup in the mirror, right? I knew it, women are bad drivers. They'll never see the guy with the electric razor who's looking in the mirror, right? Doing exactly the same thing. So we have a tendency only to notice the stuff that confirms what we already believe. Okay, now, next one, the last one, belief bias. Belief bias says we have a tendency to think that every argument that has a conclusion that we think is true is a good argument. Okay? So, if we believe the conclusion, we think the argument is good. If we don't believe the conclusion, we have a tendency to think it's a bad argument. Okay? So, and this is going to come up when we talk about arguments for the existence of God. Because frankly, there's some arguments for the existence of God that I think just not very good. Okay? But most of the time, when those things are presented to believers, most believers will say, oh, that's a great argument. Why? Because it has a conclusion that they believe in. No, what makes it a great argument is because it's valid and it has true premises, right? So you can have terrible arguments for very, very good true conclusions. But it's important to recognize that they're not very good arguments. Because if it's not a very good argument, don't use it. Use something else. There are better arguments, is the case. So, all right, make sense? I think that's the end of it. Here's the for next time. Read. I won't put this on the slide most of the time because it'll be on Canvas, right? So 17 and 24 is a reading assignment for next time. The lecture on the next thing is already up there, right? You got a message. I also won't send out a message every time I post something. You get used to looking at that on Canvas. So okay, that's there. So you can listen to the boring lecture about Descartes. Unfortunately, it's really fun material. I wish we could have done it in person, but that's the way it worked out. So any questions? Yes.
With the videos, is there any type